One fine Saturday morning, I had just gotten up and had breakfast when my neighbor knocked on my door. I opened the door and we exchanged greetings and just chatted for a few moments. I didn't mind. I knew that Sylvia would sooner or later get to the reason for her visit. She always took time to get to the point. Sylvia and Martin, her husband, were new to the area. They were friendly enough, with Sylvia proving to be a bit flirtatious, but always quite polite in her flirting, never going too far or embarrassing anyone. She was in her early 20s and quite attractive, fair skin complemented by very blonde hair and bright blue eyes. It was amazing what she could do with those eyes when she batted her eyelashes at you. Charm personified. She was also what I would call generously endowed in the bust area without being overly endowed. She had very beautiful breasts, and I'm sure every man on the street wondered how he would feel if he could only touch them. I, of course, had such thoughts. In fact, I had them right now, and it wasn't my fault. The day promised to be very hot, and Sylvia dressed accordingly, wearing this cute little white sundress that barely reached her hips. I'm by no means saying the dress was see-through because it wasn't, but standing so close to her, I could see a slight difference in skin tones. This alone was not enough to make my palms itch. It was more like how Sylvia usually talks with her hands. Her arms flew around the room, and her breasts bounced with them. Their subtle movement automatically attracted attention. We had come to this point in our conversation when I was made to understand that Martin was not at home. Yesterday, he flew out to a conference he was supposed to attend and won't be back until Monday. Unfortunately, there was a small chore he had intended to do before leaving, but he simply ran out of time. "So, I was wondering if you could help me," Sylvia said. "Perhaps," I admitted. "But I can give you a better idea of it if you tell me what this little job was." "Didn't I tell you?" she asked with a laugh. "It's because of that stupid faucet in the kitchen. It keeps dripping water and it's driving me crazy. The drip is getting worse, and last night I couldn't sleep because of the incessant drip, 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 drip. I finally went outside and turned off the water just to get some sleep. When I turned it back on, it started leaking, dripping like crazy. It's stupid to spend a fortune on a plumber to fix something so small, but I'm going crazy listening to this. I know you do all your own repairs, so I thought maybe you could replace or repair the faucet for me. Not the hardest thing in the world. I would only have to unscrew the faucet, replace the gasket, and screw the faucet back on. As easy as pie." "No problem," I assured her. "I'll come right now and do everything. Why don't you go and turn off the water again while I get my tools? Do you have a new faucet? If not, I have some spare parts." "Oh yes, I have spare parts," she said. "Martin bought some. He just didn't have the ability to replace it. If he had been home, he would have done this last night just to get some sleep." She ran to turn off the water, and I soon followed with my portable toolbox. The first thing I did when I got there was turn on the faucet to make sure she turned off the water properly. Assuming that someone followed your instructions in this regard is a mistake you only make once, and I got my way. However, no problems arose as the pipes were dry. I took the faucet apart, tossed the crumbling gasket aside, inserted a new one, and reassembled the faucet. A couple of minutes and the job was done, and Martin was a lazy bastard if he couldn't find 2 minutes for this. Sylvia ran out to turn on the water, and I turned on the tap. Water began to flow. I turned off the tap, and the water stopped without dripping a drop. Problem solved. Sylvia had been chatting the whole time I was fixing the tap, and now she wouldn't stop talking. I think the girl just liked having someone to talk to. She insisted that I sit down while she made us a cup of coffee, which I did. I didn't mind talking to the pretty woman. Not that I have anything more important than that. She fussed around turning on the coffee maker, and then reached for a couple of mugs. And that's when things got interesting. Sylvia opened the top cabinet, and it turned out that the mugs she needed were right at the very top. She stood on her tiptoes, stretching upward, and her robe lifted as she stretched. I think I mentioned that her robe wasn't that long to begin with, and as she stretched, it got shorter and shorter. It only took an inch or two to demonstrate that the bra wasn't the only thing she decided to do without when getting dressed. 2 questions immediately came to mind. Did she know she was exposing herself to me? And if so, should I have done something about it? Both answers that came to mind were yes. She knew everything perfectly. That's why she reached for the mugs on the top shelf of the cupboard rather than the ones on the lower shelves. Getting the mugs gave her plausible deniability because she couldn't actually just lift her dress and flash herself to me. As for whether I should have done something about it, if I didn't and she was just teasing, she would have quickly flared up and that would have been the end of it. She held this position too long for innocence. I rose to my feet and quietly approached her from behind. The mugs were now on the table, but there was a slight blush on her cheeks and she was breathing a little harder. My hands slid over her body, first down and then up. She gasped. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, trying to sound shocked, but succeeding only in making her sound a little out of breath and nervous. It occurred to me that there was another little chore that Martin hadn't finished, so I thought that since I'm here, I might as well do that too. "But you can't do this," she breathed. "I didn't say you could do this." I ignored her comment. She didn't say I shouldn't do it, and her resistance was purely verbal. Her body pressed against my arms, just as my arms pressed against hers. I can only imagine what she was thinking, what she was feeling, but she didn't flinch away. Now Sylvia protested. It wasn't a case of her saying, "No, don't do it." It was more like, "Oh, you shouldn't," and "Oh, we shouldn't." I pulled down my pants and lifted the back of her dress. "Oh my God, you're really going to do this? It's so awkward. I never thought you would do something like this." Awkward, I asked myself. A strange choice of word. However, I didn't worry about it because I was thinking about another problem. Should she take off her dress, leaving her naked? Or should she leave it on? Not that it bothered me, but I wouldn't mind seeing her naked. The problem was her state of mind. By touching her while she was dressed, she could claim that she couldn't stop me and it wasn't her fault. Removing her dress would mean that she was committed to what we were doing, and I suspected that she didn't want it to come out. Maybe later I can persuade her to take off her dress. Sylvia said, "We shouldn't. We really shouldn't." "Shouldn't what?" I asked. "This?" However, I was persistent, and it happened. We had sex and received great pleasure from it. At least I know I was enjoying myself, and judging by the amount of noise Sylvia made during sex, she was making the most of what she was getting. It was great. We had a great time, and I fulfilled my humble male duty. I relaxed while she just leaned against the counter for a couple of moments. I wondered how she would react now and how I could take off her dress to admire her naked body. This was not destined to happen. She suddenly straightened up and turned to face me. "I can't believe you did this to me," she said, out of the blue, as if she was just standing there as an unwilling spectator. "Get out," she said, "and never speak to me again." She was busy chasing me out of the kitchen, so I grabbed my toolbox and left. "Listen," I said as I left, "if you have any more problems with dripping faucets, just call me. You know where I am." She nodded and closed the door tightly behind me. I am going home. The rest of the day passed without incident, but in the evening I began to think. I walked over and knocked on Sylvia's door. I think she must have gone to bed early because she was wearing a frilly robe. I immediately wondered what kind of nightie she was wearing underneath, if anything she was wearing. She seemed to back away slightly when she saw me. "What do you want?" she asked suspiciously. I figured if Martin was still away, he wouldn't be able to do the little things you need him to do, so I thought I'd pop in and see if I could fill in for him. "Are you crazy?" she asked in a voice that was half a scream. "I think you've done enough for today." She turned and walked down the corridor. Seeing that she didn't bother to close the door, I naturally followed her. She did not go down to the kitchen, but headed to the front room. The TV was on, and the DVD was paused. Sylvia looked at me intently. "Do you even realize how guilty you made me feel?" "I feel terrible. I feel like I cheated on Martin, and it's all your fault." Technically, she did cheat on Martin, but I deny that it was my fault. Not that I meant to say that. Instead, I thought about the matter judiciously. If you feel guilty about it, then you will continue to feel that way until you feel like you are being punished. I can help you with this. This is ridiculous. How? Well, we would just have to give a punishment commensurate with the crime. What I would suggest is that I throw you over my knee and spank you for your bad behavior. That will be your punishment." "You must be joking," she stated quite categorically, looking at me as if I had gone crazy. "Why? This seems reasonable to me. They spank you for bad behavior and then show you what could happen if you think about cheating in the future. This will be a useful lesson that will make you repent and be satisfied that you received a punishment suitable for your wrongdoing." She just looked at me, not knowing what to say. Seeing that she wasn't saying anything, especially not saying something like, "No, I won't do that," I walked over to the couch and sat down. "Come on," I said, patting myself on the knee. "You know, as they say, the sooner you start, the sooner you finish. Well, you know what they can do with their pithy sayings, no matter who they are." She snapped. But despite everything, she moved closer to me. I reached out, caught her hand, and slowly pulled her towards me. I didn't use any real force, just applied enough pressure to her hand to make her move closer. As soon as she was next to me, my hand went to her back and pressed, and she bent over my knee in an almost dreamlike state. The dream ended abruptly when I lifted her robe, leaving her bottom bare. "Hey, what are you doing?" she demanded an answer, trying to pull the robe over her buttocks. "I'll spank you, remember?" I said. "I mean, you can't expect to be spanked when you're in a robe." "A bare bottom is the only way to spank you." Would it be helpful for you to take off your robe right away? Would it be more like punishment this way?" "No," she said rather indignantly. "The robe remains on me." Okay, so she wins this one. At the same time, she was agreeing to be spanked on her bare bottom, so I wondered if she would consider it a victory if she stopped thinking about it. "Very beautiful ass," I said, running my hand over it appraisingly. "I think it's a shame to do this." I raised my hand and quickly brought it down, giving it a painful slap, and Sylvia squealed in satisfaction. I repeated the punishment by slapping the other cheek and received another squeal in response. I didn't spank her ass, just gave her a series of sharp spanks that would sting but not hurt. Sylvia proved that she was worth spanking by letting out a low, pitiful cry with each spank. "What are you doing?" she demanded, as another spank landed in the same place. "Oh, I'm spanking you," I said. "That's no way to spank anyone," she protested. "Of course it is. I know what I do. It will all be over soon." "That should almost be enough," I finally said. "I'll just give you a little finishing touch here." It turned out that her robe was only fastened with a string, and she very quickly untied it when I opened the robe wide, leaving her completely open to my lustful gaze. That is, on my part, my look seemed lecherous, but what I was trying to show her was an expression of sincere gratitude. "What are you doing?" she asked, fiddling with the edges of her robe but achieving nothing, since I kept it unbuttoned. "Do you remember what I said would follow the spanking?" I asked, and she blushed and nodded. I promised her that she would have to see what would happen to her, and now she couldn't help but see. "Do you see what happens to bad girls?" I asked her, and she nodded. "Yes. It's horrible." "Are you really going to do this?" When I said I would make her see what would happen, I certainly didn't expect her to take me seriously or with so much interest. I wonder what her sex life was usually like, maybe in the dark and under blankets. We now had wonderful sex as she neared her climax, and I worked overtime to make sure I reached her at the same time. I exploded inside her and she just enjoyed it, taking it for granted as she climaxed very happily. "I hope this was a lesson for you," I said later. "When you misbehave, there is always a punishment." She nodded, then gave me a strange look. "Ah, but didn't you also behave badly?" she asked. "Of course not." "I'm not married," I said sanctimoniously. "I'm allowed to do this kind of thing. Anyway, this evening I simply made the amendment to your vows that I thought you needed. Good deed on my part." She said nothing to this. She just looked at me one more time and then kicked me out of the house. I went home to bed, and she probably went to bed to catch up on the sleep she lost due to the dripping faucet. What happens if I come again tomorrow evening? Will she still feel guilty and need some more fixing? Interesting idea. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.